It's not just the news.
All right. Good morning, commissioners. Welcome, and over to you, Chair Harrington.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to 2-3-23.
Wow.
Yay!
Got it. No.
Oh, it's 2-2-23.
Yeah,
That's right. Tomorrow will be 2-3-23.
Right.
Thank you. I stand corrected. I can always count on my colleagues to help me get it right. I really appreciate it.
Such important details.
No, it's okay. I have a cold. I was not successful in avoiding my husband's cold. So my brain is really like molasses today. So please help me out today. And if I say it's not computing for me, just give me a little grace. Help explain it to me another time and we'll get it. So
nod and smile. Got it.
Commissioner Rogers will be coming. He is just finishing up some constituent work this morning. So welcome to the February roundtable. We did have an update to the packet yesterday with, as always, useful information from our team. You'll want to reference the latest and greatest. So we have, this is Chair Catherine Harrington, and we have a complement of 4 commissioners at the moment until Commissioner Rogers joins us. Commissioner Nafisa Fai, Commissioner Pam Treese, and Commissioner Jerry Willey. I went down to Salem yesterday to testify before the Behavioral Health and Healthcare Committee, and in advance of that met with a few different legislators. So in preparing for that, I took a lightweight backpack with my laptop and left a pile of things at home on my desk. And last night, I was so tired, I never went into that office. So I'm really operating with half a deck today. So
Maybe we can keep up this time.
it should be pretty hilarious, I think, trying to work from my memory. So it was a successful day, proving yet again what a rock star government relations team we have and how well all of our departments were cross collaborative. At the hearing, there was a public hearing on at least 4 different bills, and our team had organized as part of a coalition in support of the bills. So there were experts testifying from Lane County, Jackson County, and Washington County, which was really great. So our team's done a phenomenal job. And I know there was something else in my notes to tell you about. Sorry, let me refer to my calendar real quick. Leading up to the NACO trip that 3 of us are going on, at the Washington County Visitors Association Board of Directors meeting, they were giving us a rundown on different promotional activities, and they've updated the Tualatin Valley Ale Trail. And even for somebody like me who doesn't drink, I like good food, so it's pretty cool to do it. And I am a shameless promoter of our Tualatin Valley. And so they had various lit coasters, brochures, socks, bottle openers. So and hats. So I said, hey, I'll wear a sash that says Tualatin Valley across it, and I'll give away lit. So they have outfitted me with lit. we might have to, as we meet with our delegation, pass out some socks. But I am doing all I can to ensure that our colleagues throughout the nation know about our Tualatin Valley and come visit and fill our hotel rooms.
That's right.
Which got me thinking, we have our logo. So yes, we have our pins. Wow, today's like the first day I don't have my pin on today. So with Philip's help, I'm making up bigger pins for us to wear. You don't know about this yet, but I talked to Jerry. So we're gonna have, they're gonna be a little smaller, but our colleagues at the National Association of Counties are going to know that we're from Washington County, Oregon. So we are going to be doing.
You're
our
making
part.
a sign like that? Yeah. That's actually not a bad idea.
It's not gonna be that big.
Not a bad idea. Might interfere with my outfit.
Don't worry, it will be fully professional. Have no worries.
By the way, Catherine, I met with the new executive director of the Tualatin River Keepers yesterday, Glenn.
Yeah.
And he was talking about this. So thank you for the brochure because I was asking for some more information. It was good timing, but anyway,
Good.
nice, good guy.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage you to,
Um,
anybody hasn't met him yet, definitely check.
For those of you who are wine drinkers, May is pink month. It's rosé month. And they usually have different restaurants that highlight that. And they have all kinds of promotions that help draw people to our area, visit our tourist sites, our restaurants, and whatnot. So they continue to do their very fine job in promoting our area and trying to do what they can to help us. I also listened in Monday evening to the state legislative the semiconductor joint committee. And with that, I was hearkening back to 4078, 2014, the Graham bargain. And I synced up with Ms. Angie and have been letting our Washington County delegation know. I haven't had a chance to physically connect with or in person connect with Senator Solomon yet. Welcome, Commissioner Rogers. But I volunteered us to host a Washington County, a public hearing here in Washington County for whatever their efforts are towards their final proposal. What has really motivated me is the concern that if we don't have such a thing, that we'll have the same multi-year overhang from constituents that say, well, we didn't know about it. We didn't get to weigh in. Salem's too far for us to go, too imposing, so on and so forth. So I also talked to Senate Majority President Rob Wagner about it, and it could also be held at PCC Rock Creek as well. So stay tuned. We'll see and go from there. So back to, so those are just a couple of significant things I wanted to make sure I shared. Before we get to our first presentation, I know I haven't had a chance yet to catch up with our latest rolling agenda. Do any of you have any questions for Ms. Angie and the team on anything you see coming up on the rolling agenda? Or are there any highlights that you want to draw our attention to?
Yes, thank you for that question, Chair. I'd like to draw your attention to February 21st. This is safety walkthrough and training of the auditorium and your board's work session space. If you may recall, this is a training that we had hoped to have, I would say, maybe even a year or so. I mean, I can't even recall when we started to talk about this.
Yep.
Moving forward, this will be an annual training as a refresher, just to continue to uplift safety in the workplace. And the sheriff's office will be conducting the training.
Thank you. I did forget another highlight. Late Friday, Tri-County chairs Jessica Vega Peterson, Tootie Smith, and myself had a meeting with the governor regarding the 3 executive orders on homelessness. I sent you a follow-up email on that, and Ms. Angie and our team is doing a really good job of keeping us up to date. At first, I was frankly a bit disappointed, but to put it diplomatically, I was pleased that she fulfilled her campaign commitment to declare a homeless crisis, because that's what we're dealing with. And executive orders are extraordinary tools. And I was really left concerned about the process from the standpoint of engagement and communication with elected officials. Particularly given the experience of the last 2, almost 3 years with COVID. Well, so I sat and reflected on that, and also reflected upon how January just has seemed like an extraordinarily busy month. Well, I realized things really are back to normal. And what's happening with the legislature is what happened with the legislature pre-COVID, right? It's just super intense, a lot. And the governor and the legislators are all focused on the legislature, right? And then there's those of us at the local level that are trying to get their attention and bandwidth to say, this is what we need at the local level. That's exactly where we're at. And so I just had to do some adjustment there and recognize that during COVID, the prior governor and her administration took on an extraordinary level of communication. And now we have new players, different intents, and it's just, even though executive orders have been used with an extraordinary tool, the communication level is not going to be the same. So that's okay.
And they're also in the forming, storming, norming process. They're in the storming piece as well.
Yes, and I was reminded quite a bit of that yesterday. Yep. So, onward, ho we go. So, and I also reminded myself that Ms. Angie has a track record of making sure we are informed, even for those things that are administrative. But we also know with 100% confidence that if there are policy changes or any investment decisions to be made, we're going to be involved. Okay. And that authority will rest with us. So we'll go from there.
I appreciated the communication that I got in my inbox from Tanya and John Wheeler and Philip. I feel like I'm really on the journey to get more informed and super informed in this discussion. So thank you to the 3 of you. And I'm sure Chair Harrington, you facilitated that. So thank you for bringing all this information. I read it, and I think I'm happy to keep getting the information from you all and relying on your expertise for guidance.
Keep up the good work. Okay, I just want to summarize a little bit of the other items that are listed under topic 1 at our previous roundtables. We had reviewed our board initiatives, but I had failed to update the document to out with the old, in with the new. So this is really just the reformatted information. It's the same information. Any new information I highlighted in yellow. So for example, we have the work plan, the initial work plan approach. So we already have a check mark, and January wasn't even done. Woohoo, yay us. And based on our discussions, I'll fill out the 2 advance years. On our committee assignments, we had updated, yes, ma'am.
In the first category, CAO annual review, that's completed.
No, this is for 2023.
Okay, so this is going to next December. Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
This is
Okay,
what used to be 2022, that column's gone. So this is all 2023 focused, which is why
just begging for,
acknowledge
yeah,
it.
exactly.
Pull out last month, you'll see it's checked. Yep,
It is.
good job. So this is for 2023, but you'll also see for
Because of
2022. Yep,
That's why I was looking.
Yep.
That's why I was thinking. It was
Yep.
both.
good job. On the boards and committee assignments, I have one correction. On the Oregon Local Government Advisory Committee, Commissioner Fye has chosen to not take that appointment. So the AOC president, we're advancing hopefully a Multnomah County commissioner for that, and we'll go from there. So I will correct that. Similarly, on the landscape version of it. That's it. Oh, dang. I forgot one. The roundtable plan has been just set up for 2023 and populated with items that Ms. Angie and I have discussed for the March meeting and onward for the June roundtable. Beyond that, the rest of it for the second page is all, I believe, what we had before. Okay?
Could I just ask a
Yes,
clarifying
of course.
question? On March 2nd, the BCC topics include 2H committee assignment.
Second half.
Second,
Yep. Yep. Sorry,
that's okay.
I'll use the word next time.
No, that's,
because
no, I just need an explanation.
No, I certainly had the room. So.
I thought it was a type of committee.
Good idea. Anything else just for informational updates that you want to share now versus wait till Tuesday or that's pertinent?
Just one thing, going back to our committee assignments.
Yeah.
On mine, it has appropriately, the West Side Multimodal.
Did I name it right or did I use?
No, that's correct. I just wanted to point out that this month, I have a conflict because it's next Monday, the same time as AOC. Both Megan and I are working with Chris Defaba, and it's been a really slow to start committee.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to.
Who's your alternate, Commissioner Church?
I believe it's Catherine, but I don't know that.
I don't think I have one.
Yeah, I don't think I have one. So.
Yeah.
So anyway, but Chris and I and Megan, thank you, have been working together to just make sure that it's
Yep.
covered.
Good job.
I hear there's also a switch from Metro side on that committee. Juan Carlos is going to be the representative. Is that
I don't-
been enough? So we'll
I
have
said it's been slow to start.
Okay. Onward, ho we go. What is that noise?
computer, I think. Yeah, text.
Oh, whoops, that's mine. I didn't have mine muted. Sorry. I'm so used to that sound.
And your mic is picking it up. No worries. It was getting my attention. It's like, oh, I must need to pay attention to something.
I am muted now.
No, your computer's.
Yeah,
muted.
that's.
So should we dive into our next roundtable topics? Oh, and Ms. Taniguchi Dennis, thank you for joining us. As far as I can tell, we don't have any CWS items moving forward in the meeting. So feel free to just listen or go about CWS business.
Great to see everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Mm.
Okay, take it away, topic 2.
Philip, if you'd like to come up to the mic, please. So the board has asked for time within roundtables to introduce staff to you. We wanted to introduce some of our communication team members across the county, and part of this had really came through from questions from you. Reflecting on the election, I had questions from board members of who's Sylvia? I've never met Sylvia. And then, we have our first ever housing communications team in Washington County. To who's Darren? So we're producing videos. So the purpose of,
That's, everybody knows Darren.
well, after today.
Some of us must look better than others on video.
As your board is where we rely heavily on our communications team to not only tell our story of the county and the great work that we're doing, they're also responding to constituent requests, public records requests, et cetera. And Philip will take this opportunity to not only introduce the high caliber of staff that we have, and also how we are evolving our communications approach and strategy, but then also kind of what are some key focus areas that they'll be working on this next year. So turn it over
Right.
to the team.
Thank you very much. No, we're very honored to have this time. We know this is really, really important time for the board. And I noticed that we were allotted 45 minutes. We practiced yesterday. I think we can give you back some of that 45
Well, when
minutes.
have you known us to be shy with questions?
Yeah, that's your time, Madam Chair. But although I have confidence we'll be able to go briskly, I don't have confidence that I'll get out of this presentation without shedding a tear of pride for this extraordinary team.
Yeah, yeah.
So
The team. I mean, I
It's-
thought Tom had quite the team. I was
Yeah.
reading that and I was like, Tom, you got some competition.
It's all about partnership. No, we're taking a play from Tom's presentation, and that was a good model for us. So we're going to try to maintain that pace. So I'm Philip Bransford, Communications Officer, he, him pronouns, and I'm joined by my astute colleague, Julie McLeod, who is going to introduce herself here in a moment. But we're very happy to be with you and just walk through some of what we do and who does it. So first, some key, foundational pieces here. We have our mission here, just informally, to lead and coordinate organization-wide communications efforts, guided by your board, but through your objectives and goals, but as delivered to us from Tanya, the county administrator. So very much in keeping with the council manager form of government. We work for all 5 of you all at once. And that's our mode. We have a role where we are doing 3 different levels of engagement here, if you will, contributing to the organization. We're providing direct service to several of the elements of our organization. We're coordinating across the full Washington County with respect to communications. And you'll see that we assist especially departments that just don't have any communications dedicated staff. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But really, it's all of it done with this one Washington County view that we are one organization, and that's our approach to communicating. And there's a great deal of partnership that ensues as you'll see. Just to paint the picture a little bit more, we put together this chart here just to show what we mean by those parts of the organization that have dedicated communication staff and those that don't. So over there on the left, we have that list of departments, offices that have at least one FTE. That's their job, their public affairs. They're focusing on information, dissemination as their mission. It's a short list, as it turns out, because off to the right, you'll see the balance of the organization doesn't have any dedicated communication staff. So that's leaving that. It doesn't mean that function goes away. It just means that it's on top of what the top manager does, for example, in a department or an office, or there could be some delegated, responsibilities going to staff that are wearing multiple hats, and communication is just one of them. I mean, in a sense, we're all doing communicating, right? We're always, every one of us are communicating, but it becomes, as you know, very tactical, very quickly, lots of work, lots of bits and pieces that have to be done. And so that's how we've approached this over time as an organization. Very recently, there has been revenue provided to the organization to, I'll say, mitigate or address some of this lay of the land that I'm putting on this table here, in the form of the supportive housing services, regional measure that brought additional money to focus on houselessness and home affordability, as well as the American Rescue Plan dollars. So, and this is a lot of this has happened in the time that Tanya has come to the county as county administrator. And so what we've done, pardon me, is we've been able to bring on additional staff and dedicate, with a small d, I'll say, or at least assign a kind of portfolio to some of the staff to augment the outreach that's needed for those two particular areas of pandemic recovery and housing and houselessness, activities, addressing those concerns, those problems. And so I've did some color coding here to indicate how those additional resources are being supported. So we have, there we go. We have even arrows here. So on the red side of it, we have some, you'll see in a moment, some of the communication staff supported by American Rescue Plan, helping with continuity of government operations in key areas, assessment and taxation being one of them. When you think about the communication demand, the expectation for transparency and ease of participation in an election, you can understand how a department that is so thinly staffed like assessment and taxation needs additional assistance. So you'll see in a moment how Sylvia has been helping to provide that surge kind of capability for that department, in addition to some of the pandemic relief that she's also been able to help with. And then on the, we've already talked about how the supportive housing services funding is helping in that regard. So we have, you'll hear about Hamid and you'll hear about Emily, and how they have as their sole client, if you will, housing services, still being part of our county administrative office communications team, but providing those additional services that, as Tanya mentioned, that department has never had in the history of Washington County, as far as I know. I look to you, Commissioner Rogers, if I've gotten that wrong. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, in part, there's also been a tremendous societal change in relationship to the need for communication transparency. And I appreciate the fact that we've been responsive to that. So certainly there hasn't been in the history, but it may not have been as required as it is today.
I completely agree. And I think, although the full county communications team in the CAO does help the entire list there on the right, there is a board, again, a board identification of a goal that's handed down to the organization, and housing and homelessness is critical to this board. It's loud and clear, not only to this board, but we have a regional, commitment, I would say, as with among your colleagues at the elected level. And that is absolutely true.
Actually, I was speaking about the elections process.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Yeah, but it's true in both cases.
Thank you.
But I think I was referring to that, but I think that, the fact that we have a red and a blue arrow is a result of what the need is. So that's good.
Okay. Well, I think we're in alignment then. Absolutely.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Hinton, I have a quick question. Philip, just checking my clarification here. By the way, Emily and Hamid, I had the pleasure of mooching out from your skills, some of the housing stuff I participated. So it's a lot of good talking points. And And information, by the way, that newsletter that comes out about housing, that's like amazing. So thank you. Good job. Going back to my question, under the red, the assessment and taxation, what's under there? Is that covered? I'm trying to figure out.
Elections is
how does
under
it-
assessment and taxation.
So, no, assessment and taxation, then there's the auditor's office, community corrections, community development, county council. Like, is that all looped in together? What's under the?
Oh, so what I attempted to do, and I apologize if the color coding has confused this, but every department or office listed there on the right, we're helping in some way.
Somewhere.
But now we have dedicated people in our team that as their portfolio, they're really focusing on helping assessment and taxation.
Not what's under assessment and taxation.
Exactly. So I
Okay,
probably
so
confused.
Just, and, okay, yeah, and then I just had that question because I was like, we have a dedicated person for assessment and taxation, but then I interpret it as there might be helping the county auditors and everything under it. And then same thing for Emily and Hamid, like housing services, but then they're helping everything else. But that's not the case.
That's not the case. no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So solely focusing on housing services and then assessment taxation.
Yeah, and it's even more complicated. So I'm going to let them speak for
Okay.
themselves because when you get to each one of them, they can explain a little bit more how they're approaching their portfolios. But hopefully we've clarified what the intent was with that list there to the right.
Right.
And I'll just add before we move off this slide, another thing that's happened in my time is that the county administrative office itself has grown significantly in its communication needs with the advent of the Office of Equity, Inclusion and Community Engagement. Our first ever staff in economic development, more than one staff now, and there's more that needs to be communicated. So we're doing
Quarterly town halls,
that. Town halls, exactly.
right? Full-time commission because of the size of our county government and the amount of work that needs to be attended to. Thank you for recognizing that. But before you move on,
Mhm.
I also have a question for clarifying on here. With the regional affordable housing bond measure, and I don't remember this, so it may be a question for offline or for later. I'm curious I just don't remember if that bond measure provided any funding for our own efforts our team has to plan those and communicate the accomplishments along the way to tell that story. And so that's part of the housing department and communication there. And so I just don't know if that it's in a bond sense that's thought of as administration. And I just don't remember if that bond provides for any of that cost coverage.
We'll follow up on that
Yeah. Okay. Thank
so
you.
that we're clear.
Yes, thank you. It's a good question. All right.
I also have a question about on the left side at the bottom, West Side Commons. I assume that communication is really around promotional issues, filling space, event space, managing that. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
And the fair.
And the fair. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to march through each team member's portfolio. But one thing I want to do before we go into that array of detail is just provide an overarching message here about what every one of us is committed to, and that includes our equity, diversity, and inclusion work. So every one of us is doing something with that, with respect to that aspect of the county's equity work. We're on committees. We're using that lens as best as we can. We're learning ourselves. We're on our own journeys here, and partnering from the get-go with that expanded part of the county operation, the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. And similarly, we're committed to emergency preparedness and response. Communication is vital, and as you well know, as the whole organization has experienced, the community has experienced multiple times, there's a lot that goes into supporting our response in the event of an emergency or a disaster. And so we have a picture there. It says PIO. That stands for Public Information Officer. That's one of the names that they have for we sorts here. And that's something too that we're emphasizing across the entire communications team. And we're not alone in that. The other departments that have those staff are also committed to that as well. So I just wanted to point that out before we move through here. So now I want to bring forward the team. Oh, go right ahead.
Yeah, before you do that, a point that I want to make back at the very beginning, and I've known you since you walked in the door. Yeah, while Peck was here, and I think you followed him. One of the things in your mission statement, and this is just a suggestion, that I think is missing is a number of adjectives. And I think you've done these, but they're not clear, and it would be clear to the public. You've been objective in your communications. You've been fair, as far as I can tell. You've been transparent. You use that word yourself. You've been unbiased. And almost as a journalist, and I know you say you're public information people and not journalists, but you are journalists. And you have a duty to the public as well as this board. And I know you work for administration, but you also have a duty, I think, to the public and this board to be everything that I just said. So I would hope and encourage at some point that you go back and look at your mission statement and put out those kinds of things that you do, because you have done them, and tell the public that you're not just a mouthpiece for a political cause or a political position or for this board or for the bosses they have. You're more than that. So just a suggestion.
It's an excellent suggestion, and we really appreciate it. There are values and a dimension about ethics that weren't expressed on that slide, and you've brought that, you've raised that. So I appreciate that, Commissioner. Thank you.
There is no, what's the word? Aggrandizing?
Yeah.
At all,
Yeah.
even though it's phenomenal work.
Well, it turns out it's a phenomenal organization, so it makes our work easy in that respect. Okay, well, without any further ado, if you don't mind, I'd like to bring our team here one at a time. And Julie and I are going to start here. And again, we practice this, so we're going to try to do it quickly. So again, I'm Philip Bransford, Communications Officer, he, him pronouns. It's 18 years ago, I came over from the Association of Oregon Counties. I don't know if you heard about them, but
I'm sure Chair Harrington have heard of them
Have-
a lot.
okay.
Lately.
I'll save time and not go into my background about organization. But no, I came, as Commissioner Rogers mentioned, I came over spelled Walt Peck was my predecessor who went off to Tarleton Valley Fire and Rescue. I've worked with the public organizations here in Oregon and also in Washington, D.C. There was once something called the Oregon University System. That's it's different now, but back in the day I worked there. And then in D.C. I worked for a think tank called the Urban Institute. I cut my teeth at a public radio station in San Francisco, KQED, working for a program. It's not unlike, if you ever listen to OPB radio, it's like the Think Out Loud program. That's the program. It's that version, you know, that idea. That's where I started. And you're going to hear this from several of us. We're recovering journalists, some of us. So that kind of discipline is part of what we're swimming through here. Undergrad at Evergreen State College, go Gooey Ducks, and got a master's in public administration from George
GWU. Yay.
Yes, in Washington, D.C. So my focus areas are supporting the county administrative office. That includes the components that I talked about that are more recent. I'm the direct go-to here with the county counsel's office, but you know, everything that I'm saying, we all help too. So it's not black or white here. Emergency management, I'm sort of the go-to there. And again, we all have a responsibility there. And my focus is in playing a management role for this illustrious group and helping with strategic planning in the communication sense, but then helping us support the bigger idea of strategic planning, helping with the county budget. Anytime your board considers putting a measure on the ballot, I'm usually part of that and often leading it. And then public records in general, that's a collaborative effort. We get a lot of guidance from county council in that regard. But those are my that's me. This is my little baseball card here, and I'm going to hand immediately now to my colleague, unless you have.
Hang on. I'm glad that you provide your expertise with regard to strategic planning, but you I would offer the correction as well that the county strategic plan be added to that line, because that is a separate project from the role and the expertise around strategic planning. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you. That's a
Yes.
good observation.
And colleagues, as we did with the county counsel's office, why don't we give the team a chance to introduce themselves, and then we can go into questions for the group after that. Does that make sense? Great. Thank you. Who's next?
Thank you, Chair. Julie McLeod, my pronouns are she and her. I'm a Public Affairs and Communications Coordinator in the County Administrative Office. I've been with the county a little over 21 years. I was hired in 2001. I had the honor of working at the Sheriff's Office, doing crime prevention, community education, and livability issues with residents. Did that for about 10 and a half years, and then I had the opportunity, the privilege to come to the County Administrative Office and work with Philip. I also served previously at the City of Hillsborough as a crime prevention officer, community service officer, police officer for a little over 10 years as well.
You used to be a police officer?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes, very short. I've done a lot of things and had great experiences, which have really helped inform the work that I do now. I also worked for a short time at the Hillsborough School District as a campus safety monitor and really love working with youth. So yeah, a lot of different experiences that have helped me get where I am today. I have a bachelor's of science degree from Oregon Institute of Technology and Medical Technology, and also graduated from the Oregon Police Academy. Internally, I work a lot with communications related to just general staff knowledge, but I also support those internal support services functions whenever they need me. And also work real closely with our public safety and justice partners. Obviously, the Sheriff's Office and DA's office have their own PIOs and communications team, but juvenile and community corrections do not. So I have the opportunity to work with them quite a bit too.
Great. Okay. We're going to play musical chairs.
And she's an avid gardener and grows beautiful flowers.
Also,
And is known to share them with us. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
But she's also a good grandmother.
Oh, awesome. That's a huge role.
Your grandma too? My goodness. I learned a lot. Our staff.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Sylvia Pereira, and I've been with the county almost 2 years now. My title is Public Affairs and Communications Coordinator. My position is a designated bilingual position focusing on Spanish language. It is funded through the American Rescue Plan. My communications background, I am also a recovering journalist. So my background's in journalism, public relations, community engagement. And I'm a former news producer. I worked at Fox 12 Oregon. I've also worked at NBC 16 in Eugene. That's where I spent the majority of my career. I've also been a public relations coordinator focusing on the Hispanic media market in Southern California. So my clients range from nonprofits to community organizations to some bigger accounts like Disneyland, the happiest place on earth. I earned my bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism from Cal State Fullerton, go Titans. And last year, while with Washington County, I earned my Master of Science in Strategic Communications from the University of Oregon.
That's great.
Thank you. Lastly, I'm fluent in Spanish, and I also studied Portuguese in college, but I am not muito bom anymore. So my current focus is supporting the county budget and town hall communications. The American Rescue Plan, we work a lot with our vendors, communicating information to our Spanish language community, just really focusing on that community engagement. I also support assessment, taxation, and the elections office. So my background in journalism, really helps create that media relations and transparency. So I'm glad Commissioner Rogers asked that question about being unbiased. So I take those golden rules of journalism very personally. And I apply that to everything that I do. I also support the economic development program. And I also work with public health. We have a bilingual monthly newsletter that we use as a communication tool for CBOs and the general public. And lastly, I just fill in the gaps when we need some public information during severe storm weather events, heat waves and things like that, when there's not those departments who have a Spanish language communication support system, then I'm more than willing to step in and help out. So thank you.
Oh, good hire, Philip.
Right?
Oh, treasure.
And you made me think of a question, so don't worry, I wrote it down. I'll come
Okay,
back.
all right, we'll move right along. Thank you, Sylvia.
So as Sylvia is moving, I do want to just underscore Sylvia's plan is funded with the ARPA funds. If not for that funding source, we would not have had our first bilingual dedicated communication staff member. And so this has really increased our language access to our community. So thank you, Sylvia.
Yep. We've learned so much about the need to ensure that we're communicating with all of our community members, including our historically disadvantaged folks. So, and don't feel like you have to rush. This is our chance to get to know you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Emily Roots. I think I've met most of you at this point.
Famous Emily Roots.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just in case. I use she, her pronouns, and I also started at the county about 2 years ago. Sylvia and I think started within a week or two of each other. And I actually started within the Department of Housing Services. I was their first communications support, but what we found pretty quickly moving on is that I was working so closely already with Philip and Julie and then Sylvia that it really made sense to bring me into the county administrative office and give me kind of that team structure while still focusing on housing as my sole client.
Oh, I thought you were always
right, and that's why it made sense.
but just embedded. Oh,
and that's why it made sense to move me.
Yes,
because I was already working so much with Philip and this team, and I'm really thankful for their support. It's been a wonderful experience. So prior to working at Washington County, I was at the city of Beaverton for about 5 years. I did kind of a variety of neighborhood community engagement and then housing specific communications. And then before that, I started my career at the city of Hillsborough when Commissioner Willie was the mayor. Every once in a while, I start to say Mayor Willie and I have to catch myself. And I did kind of a bunch of things over at the city of Hillsborough in sort of like community engagement and communications type roles. My educational background is I went to Pacific University, got my bachelor's in political science, and then I completed my master's in public administration at Portland State. So again, when I started at Washington County, I was their only communication support for housing. Now we have Hamid on board, which is fantastic. And I'll let you share more about his role. And that's kind of allowed me to narrow my focus more specifically on homelessness. So that includes, of course, supportive housing services, which is a real lion's share of our budget. But it also includes Continuum of Care, which is our federally funded programs to address homelessness, the point in time count, which we just did in January. And I believe preliminary results will be coming in the next few months. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Of course, our encampment management program, which is a pilot program, but demands a significant communication supporting role. And then siting shelters, which can be kind of a variety of different programs, but also requires a significant communications investment to be successful.
Excellent.
awesome. Thank you.
Aren't they so impressive? I'm just
So much.
Hamid.
Morning. I'm Hamid Evenson. I'm the counterpart to Emily Roots, Housing Communications Coordinator. Nearing a year of experience with Washington County. I have previous communication experience with ALA. They're a loss adjusting international company based out of Dubai. Before that, I worked for HistoriCorps, a national nonprofit based in Colorado. Its mission is to save historic sites all across America. And before then, I worked for an intergovernmental agency headquartered out of Rome, focusing on saving historic sites across Africa and Asia. And before that, I've also served in AmeriCorps, assisting Portland's Metropolitan Family Services, focusing on East Portland and economic empowerment was my main focus. Educationally speaking, I have a BA in communications from Marquette University in Wisconsin and a MA in anthropology from Stony Brook University in New York, both full ride scholarships. I'm fluent in Arabic. And yes, my current focus is more on the housing authority communication needs. So specifically right now, the AHP4, which is the Affordable Housing Development Portfolio Rehabilitation, which are focusing on 5 sites, misleading, even though it's AHP4, throughout Washington County. And the housing voucher programs, such as the housing choice vouchers, project-based vouchers, and so forth, and any HUD-related initiatives such as House America. And yes, I'm supporting all the affordable housing communication needs, including the housing bond. So there's a lot of projects going on right now that are coming online with the groundbreakings, grand openings, and so forth. I'm very appreciative of being a part of this team, and thank you very much.
I had no idea you were fluent in Arabic. You know how many
Yes.
events I've seen? Oh, this is wonderful. I'm so glad we're doing this. I'm learning so
So
much.
am I.
That's what I thought I do, and so
I'm a little worried about what this response is going to be to the staff. Oh, could you help me here? Oh, could you?
yeah.
The word is out.
I have a question of you. I'm always fascinated with people who have an interest in ancient sites, because I think,
Yes.
if we don't preserve that, we're gonna lose a lot of who we are, and this is completely off topic on what you guys are doing today, but Washington County is quickly losing its past very, very fast every day. I've kind of redundant comment, but it's because of the complete building over many of what we had as traditional sites for farming and agriculture, even native lands. Put in the back of your mind, I'd love to hear what we might do to do more of an inventory, more of a communication piece. I know we have a historical society who does the best they can with limited funds, but
So do we.
yeah, and so do we do, yeah. But I don't know that it's enough. I'd be curious on somebody with that expertise to hear your thoughts at some point. Anyway, completely off topic, but it's fascinating.
Sounds like the two of you are going to have a one-on-one soon.
I
Yeah.
definitely have lots to respond to that another time, as you said. All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Darren, you're up.
All right, hello.
Hi.
I'm Darren Averman. I'm your video producer, and thanks for taking time to meet me and speak with me. I really appreciate that. I have a lot of experience directing meetings and being in the booth for hearings and land use hearings and all kinds of things. This is my first time being on the mic and in front of the camera. So,
See?
a little tougher. So yeah, I've been with Washington County 1 year yesterday, and I'm an ARPA funded employee. And I have 20 years experience in video production. And the last 10 years, I've been running my own small business, but my largest client was Clackamas County. And so I worked there for 9 years with the Board of County Commissioners and directing their meetings. And then I also worked with TGA with different departments, emergency management, water environment services, just the whole gamut of different departments over there. I've won multiple NATOA awards and Telly awards over there with Clackamas, and let's see. And as a small business owner, I've worked for a lot of different businesses, small and large. The American Red Cross, some of the larger ones, National VA Hospital, as well as small businesses, just friends, companies, things like that, event businesses and such. So, but I'd really like to take my time to plug some of my projects that I've been working on with Washington County here. So if you haven't had a chance to see some of the videos I've produced, I've done a series on ARPA stories with different COVID vaccination sites. And then I've also done work with the A&T department with the Commissioner District Reapportionment, if you've seen those videos as well, and elections with voting made easy and how to fill out your ballot. So there's quite a bit of work that you can see on YouTube. And Currently, I'm working on a project with economic development, focusing on small businesses and the different community-based organizations that the county works with to support those small businesses. Adelante Mujeres and Black Advisory Business Council. I went to the University of Iowa, and then I also went to Portland State University to do graduate studies. My background is in art and art history. So I have trained as a painter, drawer, that kind of thing. So I also do animations, and I work a lot with After Effects and Premiere. So.
I'm a firm believer that everyone is from somewhere, but I'm always fascinated with the stories of how each one of us as individuals and families ends up here in Oregon. So,
Yeah, and I can't believe you've been here 1 year, Darren.
Yeah.
You're quite the expert.
I guess you've had a lot of interaction with Darren, huh?
Yeah. Well, Jerry and I did with the shelter. And, yeah.
Oh, Cloverleaf, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, not Cloverleaf.
Yeah, that was the Cloverleaf.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah,
it
I've done
Cloverleaf?
a few videos with supporting housing services, the Cloverleaf, as well as the Safe Rest Pods.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm currently working on some
Okay.
myth busting around the point in time count that happened last
Yes.
week, interviewing some
Yeah.
City of Hillsborough sergeants, as well as Washington County staff and the executive director of the Project Homeless Connect. So
Oh,
look-
I'll
take
have
a look
to
for
watch
those
that
coming out.
video.
yeah, there are going to be a series of myth busting videos.
Cool. Great.
And congratulations on your first year.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
All right, there's a couple more team members who weren't able to be here today that I'll do my best to.
Gary is a real
He's a
person.
real person.
She's not a
But where
bot.
is she?
He is at Disney.
Literally.
He is at.
She's off role modeling, having a vacation.
Yes, yeah. Turns out her and her husband have birthdays. They were last like one after the other on the calendar, and so they both love Disneyland, so they're down there right
Great.
Oh, wow.
enjoying themselves. But
The happiest place on earth.
exactly, yeah. She's been here 2 years now, and before that, she'd spent 8 years with the city of Portland, working for the Office of Community and Civic Life, formerly the Neighborhood Involvement
Yeah.
Office there. And she also had some experience working at the Water Bureau. A lot of help with the public records with the city of Hillsborough, or I'm sorry, city of Portland. She understood the main software tool that we use already from that experience, and just jumped right in here in Washington County. She's got a Bachelor of Arts in Criminology and Criminal Justice from PSU. So yes, she handles this organization-wide system, not only the software tool, but liaising with the different departments, because each of them have public records officers, and we're all working to meet that state mandate. There are timelines, deadlines that we have to meet in statute for public records requests. We get hundreds and hundreds of them. Thousands if you want to look at the sheriff's office, which has its own separate staff support, not through Mary. She also, as you know, helps coordinate that constituent response system. So a lot of the authors on your behalf of just, the straight up facts about the situation that maybe a constituent just didn't know about are sitting here as part of the team, but then she rolls up all of that information into that every Friday report that you all receive. Just keeps the trains running with that whole system. And in addition, as if that weren't enough, she also more and more playing this role of being kind of that anchor for the whole team with our other tools that we are ramping up on, data systems, tracking, process management, that sort of thing. It's just rapidly become a very important part of our operation.
Which probably helps you be as efficient and effective as you can with the limited resources that we have at our disposal.
Exactly.
Aha,
Yep.
great.
Yeah, very appreciative of her.
Tools often need a little glue.
They do. And
Lubricant.
yes, exactly. And then another stalwart here is Sherry Drills, graphic designer, her tenure is longer than mine here with Washington County. Before she arrived here, she had nearly a decade of professional graphic design experience, with her own shop. She's got a bachelor's from California State University in Northridge. Anything to do with any visual branded element of Washington County, she probably had a role in. She maintains the logo standards for how our logo is used. Every budget document, for example, the covers, all the photos, the graphic display there of the budget documents and other reports she's done signage, you name it, she's done it. I remember she did I don't know what it's called, but it's when you can plaster a vehicle with an image.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Graphics,
Yeah.
like you see on TriMet
Yeah.
vehicles and such.
Wraps.
Wraps, thank you. She did those for Cooperative Library Services. She helps us with our social media graphics, fact sheets, helped with the webpage. Tremendous team player, and has been here longer than I have. So we have a
Well, I
lot of.
really appreciate how there are multiple communication emails that the organization provides not only for the board, but also for some external publication. And I really appreciate how there are these templates that bring to life graphically, not just in the words and the other ingredients, links to videos, links to other information packages. But it is visually interesting, but delivers the flavor of that work. So it helps me in my role in being able to absorb communication across this very, I didn't want to use very and varied at the same time, but this wide ranging organization, because it can be a lot, but it really does help me absorb the work that is happening, the issues that we're working on to try and make sure that I am showing up informationally prepared to participate in decision making. My brain gets tired.
Would Sherry be working on the chair's pinned request for the NACO
Yes.
conference? By the way, Chair Harrington, I'm also attending that conference.
Oh, very good. Okay.
And we just went ahead and put in for additional backup buttons for you all too. So stay tuned. I see
For
the
the
shift,
future.
but Sherry put those together.
Yep.
Go
Phil,
ahead.
a very unrelated topic, but Tom would have an interest in it. I always ask folks who have creative people on their staffing, do they sign away the rights to any properties created on the job with tools that they have used here at the county or time that they spent on the county, and why that's important. I've ran across my professional career where people have developed products or other kinds of intellectual property. And as they leave, they want to take those with them. And we didn't have, or the clients didn't have any sort of a document that says that they're not theirs. They belong to
Okay,
the entity.
we'll have to look into that.
I don't know if they do that, Tom, but it'd be wise.
Hoping there's something in our personnel manual.
Yeah,
Work product.
yeah, you sure want to do that. When you get a lot of creative people who have businesses of their own, you want to make certain that on our time, our dollars, anything they develop here is ours.
The Fremont Troll, it's a famous example of that. We built with Seattle city dollars.
Check with CWS too.
What?
Check with
Oh, that's
CWS
the same
too.
issue.
Thank you.
Well, in any event, the contribution has been huge. She also, by the way, helps with other departments that have questions and, are trying to, sometimes they have graphic design resources on their side of it as well. And so she ends up being an answer, kind of learning resource. So very appreciative of sharing. And we're at time, but I wanted to just put this in front of you. We don't have time to go into everything here, but these are some of the things that are rolling.
Simply
along.
must cover this whole slide.
I can let you read. I mean, we can talk for a long time about any one of these, but this is in rough order of their, kind of being worked on. The big lift here that our team either all of us or some of us are working on, obviously design the future and one Washington County, that approach and how we communicate around it. The county budget is just a huge lift for us, but we're working in cooperation with community engagement. So we're more on that inform side of the IAP2 spectrum, and they go deeper into that spectrum. We work together, we partner with them. And then, and you've already heard about some of the work that Emily and Hamid are doing, and what Sylvia is doing on the rescue plan. We're obviously working with you and with Daniel and others on the state of the county. Departments are helping with that. We were anticipating more effort here from Office of Equity with respect to our civil rights compliance, and that there's a lot of signage, there's a lot of communicating to do around that. The board-led strategic plan, thank you, Chair, for mentioning that earlier. And then I understand from John Wheeler that for the first time since the pandemic, we are looking at a full-scale exercise. We haven't done one for years since the pandemic hit. This go around about earthquake, I know that's something that you all have talked and exercised around yourselves. So looking forward to being part of that. That concludes the presentation. This is thank you in all of our safe harbor languages. Just a little touch.
Oh, neat.
So thank you to
Commissioner.
the team, too.
Yes, thank you. Commissioners, questions, comments?
Well, first of all, I just want to thank all of you for providing these opportunities. I think that Commissioner Fry mentioned that earlier. It really lets me know who the people are that we're working with. We see you, we work with you out in the field in different places, but this is really helpful. And it is kind of mind-blowing about the information about each and every one of you at a personal level. It just adds to the complexity, the diversity of our staff and the values that you all hold. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, it's really terrific to get to know them more. Yeah. So if I could, I just have a couple of questions
All right.
for you. So this is my second local government agency where I've served as an elected official. And I'm wondering, Philip, for the communication team members, across our 3 metropolitan counties, with cities as well. So all of our local government comms folks, do you have forums where you can get together and share techniques versus just always dealing with the issue of the day or the project of the day?
That's a great question. There's professional associations, and we're doing our best to be participants in some of those. The City County Communications Marketing Association, 3CMA, had their annual conference, the national conference in Portland just recently, and some of us were able to go to that. Other conferences might be a little bit more germane to a specific discipline, like houselessness and those kinds of things. So we're doing our best to stay in that partnership. But I must admit that a lot of the interaction is more issue driven. Public health continues to meet in a regional capacity across the 3 counties since the pandemic. Great cooperation there. Whenever there's a bad weather headed our way, there's a activation, at least on the communication side, where we talk to one another. I know with houselessness, there's coordination going on across the other 2 counties in our region as well. So mostly issue driven, I would have to say.
Well, Ms. Angie, I want to compliment you in really helping us as an agency advance our workforce training, and that includes association involvement. I'm a firm believer that it is incumbent upon the employer to ensure that the employees are able to continue to evolve their skills and also fill their well of energy. It's not just about doing the grind of doing the work all the time, and you exemplify that and support that for our organization and advance our capacity. So thank you. Just a couple of other quick things. Thank you, Hamid, for reminding me that the rehabilitation portfolio is actually 5 sites. I was driving by Bonita Village the other day, and boy, I'm looking forward to seeing some of our communication around that, because we saw through the reserve, not the reserve, the Bull Mountain, the one on Bull Mountain, the Ridge. Thank you. Yes, thank you. The Ridge, that they really are rehabilitating it through the whole building skin as needed per building. The look of the buildings is totally changing with the Bonita.
The facade.
Yes, yes, it's modernizing. They're going to be beautiful. They're not just blocks of buildings anymore. And it's really highlighting it. It'll be a nice neighborhood community. So it's very exciting to me. And then I was going to inquire about how you're going about communications, and I'll still phrase it that way. But Darren mentioned it too. So much of what I appreciate the board has supported over these 4+ years now is being intentional about our community engagement. And I mean, not just with our residents, but also with all of our community partners. And the pandemic and multiple other challenges over these last few years provided us with ample opportunity, but our whole workforce has really stepped up to the plate. And I appreciate how different communication vehicles are highlighting how our community group partnerships really do strengthen the fabric of our community and reflect back to us that we are a community with diverse threads making up that fabric. So I look forward to seeing and hearing more of it through all the channels.
Excellent.
So, thank you.
It's been great. Thank you, everybody, because I didn't know I've known Julie a long time, certainly known Emily, but it was good to meet all of you. So thank you.
We've certainly benefited from your work product. Thank you.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you, board. We appreciate it.
But watch out.
Don't worry, we won't break chains. We're still gonna bombard with Tanya. Now we know. You can say a name now. So.
Philip, before you leave,
Very.
and before we start on the next topic, I was reminded, or I reminded myself through the rolling agenda that we received an email with regard to the February Board of Commissioners Town Hall. And you're, as always, proposing something and asking us what our thoughts and involvement are. I believe that with travel schedules, that 3 of us will be at that particular Commissioner Town Hall. And without further ado, because it's the 2nd of February and that's only 21 days away. So we need to support your development. There was a question about the run of show and the explanation, and I wasn't sure if the 2 of you had the opportunity to catch that email yet and weigh in, and for us to close on that. So I guess what
Behind on email, Philip,
Okay.
I apologize.
so
I'm sure I will be okay.
let me
Whatever
just
you write.
put a tickler in, then take a look at that. Feel free to weigh in over email, and then let's come back to it next Tuesday.
Okay.
Perfect. Great. I just didn't want it to get by us. And that town hall will be held at the Washington Street Conference Center, because we have another monthly county event that happens in the auditorium that evening. Terrific. Great. Onward, ho we go. And commissioners, how are we doing? Do we need a quick break? We didn't schedule one in,
I don't.
but are we okay to keep going? Okay,
I'm just gonna go get a glass of water.
okay, terrific. You'll be back.
I'll be.
So, Mr. Greg Munn, please come on up and reserve policy. Woohoo! So, put the Federal Reserve page on us now.
I think I can reserve.
All right, this is hot off the press, so I'm giving you paper copies.
No problem.
2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, the vaccine, did you get it?
Oh, oops, I got an extra.
The oyster, yeah, we have a cross name. Didn't mispronounce.
So, while we're getting settled,
Nafisa?
while we're getting settled, and just a reminder for the board, based on staff's understanding, roundtables are really meant for like instruction. So this is an example where we didn't have the presentation uploaded in time because frankly, it was done last night. So,
Okay,
just
our clerk make sure that we get it up
I'm
there.
just
Yep.
reminding the board, this is different from how we handle work session or board meeting packets. And the purpose of today is just continuing that journey as we go through the budget development process. And a common question that is asked, and especially I would say from my experience and also Mr. Munn's experiences, why do we have the level of reserves? Can't we put those reserves into work, into action for the community? And to me, that's that question is heightened at the time that we have constraints or that we have cuts. So we wanted to take this opportunity to get alignment with your board around where we are today and then future discussion and direction as we look at our reserve policy and practices.
Well, good morning, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. My name is Greg Munn. I'm with the County Finance Office. And as I was sitting back there listening to Philip and his crew, I was thinking about why do I have to follow him? And when I sat down,
Numbers are fun.
Tom leaned over and said, "That's a tough act to follow." So I feel this heightened sense.
Trying to intimidate you.
Step
You're
up my
fine.
game.
You're fine.
But I would like to say, I was sitting there thinking about that, and one of the first parts of the county I remember as I was doing some of my research were those little budget videos that were put out, and I just confirmed with Philip that that was Darren's work. And and when I remember seeing those, I've been through every single one of them at least once, and most of them twice. And the information was great and all that, but what really impressed me was the professionalism. Like I hadn't seen that level of professionalism. So now given what I just heard about his background, I understand a little bit better. So,
Welcome to Washington County.
yeah, so that was a very, very good job.
All kinds of hidden treasure.
All kinds, yes. So today is a carry-on from the January 5th roundtable meeting. And at that meeting, we talked a little bit about our budget planning, big picture, talked about budget redesign. And today, what I'm gonna do is get into a little bit more depth and talk about reserves. Talking about reserves on their own is not as easy. It's not isolated, it's connected, and it's particularly connected in our policies as well. So I'm gonna try to do as good a job as I can, maybe not as good as Philip would do, but to explain that connectedness with the purpose of helping us as we move forward and we build our budgets and we understand our financial reports in the long run. Okay. There we go. Okay. So today's topics are, again, to do a quick revisit of the budget process redesign. You may get tired of seeing the same graphics over and over again, but my hope there is that we at least have something for us all to ground ourselves in as we move forward. And And also what's important is definitions. It's easy for people like me to rattle off definitions of things that I've talked about for years and years and years and acronyms. And I forget sometimes that I leave people in the dust. So my intention is to slow that down a little bit and talk about what those definitions mean, because not just the definition of those individual components, but they're related to other definitions. So it'll be real important to do that. And then with that, those definitions is to take those and go through a real quick mock exercise of a very simple budget, and then what that budget looks like afterwards when we report the actuals. So we'll see how that works. And then lastly, just to talk about our current policies around reserves and contingency and fund balance and how all those relate together. And I'll give you some of my initial observations on those policies and where I think we can go in the future. Okay, so to flash back to our budget redesign process, this is a graphic again that I've shown you several times.
Hey, you learned how to make fancy red lines versus hand-drawn ones.
I was in a little bit of a hurry, but I decided I needed to step it up a little bit. I'm particularly glad now that I did after following the comms folks. So what we're going to talk about today is more diving into the box, the red box, the financial policies. In that box, there's revenue, debt, user fees, there's a bunch of components in there, but within that is reserves, contingencies, fund balance, those sorts of things. But as I mentioned earlier, none of those exist on their own. They're interconnected with other components of our overall management plan, our overall management structure. Part of that is that those policies are related to our operating budget, and that's the arrow that points up. It tells us how much we should set aside in contingency. So it affects there. It also affects our accounting and reporting, because dollars that we put aside in contingency in budget that don't get spent end up showing up as fund balance in our financial reports. So there's that connectivity. And then also one of the hot topics we've been talking about now for a while is our capital budget and our capital improvement plan. And these policies also help guide us in possible ways to fund either debt service, which is essentially borrowing for long-term expenditures, capital expenditures, or to save enough funds to actually cash fund one-time expenses like a master plan or a major capital improvement project. So that's today's focus. And then to get into a little more specificity, I showed you this plate last time, and this was in January. This was just an update on where we were with some of our more specific initiatives around budget process redesign. But today we're going to talk about those items that have the red arrows next to them. So we'll get into policies on contingency, fund balance, cash and reserves.
The CAFR was published?
The annual consolidated financial report, we've actually been producing that for 36 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't get an email, did we?
Yeah.
We did?
It's not done yet this year.
It's not done this year, but last year's finished, and we'll have the opportunity to celebrate the award that we received for FY21.
I know. Huh.
Yeah. And then again, the relationship, the last red arrow there to our countywide CIP. Okay, so let's move on to some definitions here. And these, so we don't have to memorize these, but if you get the concept, and we'll move into an actual spreadsheet that shows how they work in an accounting system. So the first one is revenue. I think most people are pretty clear with what that is. It's just effectively for government. For the most part, it's any cash that comes in the door is created as, or is considered revenue. It's property taxes, it's grants, it's IGAs with other governments and so forth. Expenditures, that's the use of those funds on an ongoing day-to-day basis to run the county. It pays for payroll, it pays for fuel, it pays for utilities in our buildings, it pays for maintenance in our buildings. Debt service, that's the principal and interest payments on our outstanding borrowing that's due during the current fiscal year. So we could take, say, a large capital project, borrow for it, and then those payments would be made over the course of 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years. I'm going to leave that at that because I have something else to explain, but I'll wait till the next page. And then contingency, those are the dollars. That's a budgeted estimate. That's not an actual accounting term. It's a budget term. So we put it in our budget, a contingency in our budget, so that we reserve some appropriations, some of our revenue in the event that something happens that we're not thinking about. It's just a safeguard. Reserve.
Use a standard percentage for that?
Yes, you can. We'll talk about that too. Reserves are a savings account. We put it in a rainy day account. We put it in a savings account that we're not going to use this year, but that we want to use or may need to use in the future. We could reserve funds for, like I mentioned earlier, a master plan or a capital project, or we could save to partly fund a courthouse expansion, those sorts of things.
Could I ask a question here? Is the reserves also for any unforeseen need as well? It says for a specific purpose, and I just, sometimes those purposes aren't foreseen. Is
Yeah,
that
that's
correct?
true. Yeah, true. And that's actually a really good question. So let me see if I can paint a line between contingency and reserve.
Yeah.
So contingency would be those unforeseen things that could happen this next budget cycle. Reserves could be for something unforeseen beyond next budget cycle.
Okay. So for example, the jail, where would that fit in those two categories?
That would be reserves.
Reserves. Okay, that's what I thought. I'm just trying to figure those out.
Contingency, isn't it true contingency you can also tap into without having a supplemental budget? Whereas if you use reserves, you do.
That's right.
So what you're saying is you have to have a budget plan for what they use for the reserves. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's more than just a plan. It's like having a CD that comes due versus your savings account where you can draw from.
Got it.
From a personal finance standpoint.
So the last one is fund balance. And here's the key message here is there's a relationship between budget and our actual financial reports is between more or less contingency and fund balance. If we don't spend the contingency that's in our budget, it will roll forward because it's reserved dollars in our current year, and it will roll forward and become fund balance at the end of the year. That'll be
carry forward.
It's a set aside. It's not a reserve.
So that's one. Yeah. So that's a key. That's key to remember that. But it's also, as we talk about policies here in a little bit, I want to try to draw that connection between the two.
Okay, I'm confused. Does it change definition from contingency to fund balance?
The contingency becomes fund balance.
Right. Okay.
But then when you rebudget again, you
define
in more.
You put in contingency again.
Right.
So
Got
you
it.
kind of, it's a step procedure to get from one year to the next.
Yep. It's just a set aside. Think of it as a set aside in your checking account. Right? It's a minimum balance sort of.
Minimum balance.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. Yeah.
Yep. That you can go below, but you aren't planning to. Yep. Okay, so up on the screen or in your handouts, this is a real simple $100 budget. And these are the major components of the budget. So I'll give you some relationship to this, to what we're doing right now in budget. So the beginning balance, revenue, and expenditure and contingency, those lines, mostly revenue, expenditure, and beginning balance, that's what staff's working on right now. So to create a beginning fund balance for FY24, which starts July 1st, staff is spending time now estimating based on the actuals that have been spent to date in FY23 and projecting those out to say, here's where we think we're going to be at June 30th in our fund balance. Here's how much we're going to think we have left over. If we haven't spent our contingency and we don't expect it to spend our contingency, we think that those dollars might come back in. So that's what they're working on now, is estimating that. Expenditures, the budget office produces a payroll forecast countywide. And then our departments use that payroll forecast plus other factors to develop their ongoing budgets. So effectively, that's building our operating budget. That's under operations. Under capital, technically, debt service is paid out of operating budgets, but I've separated it here because it pays for capital. So this could be a little bit confusing, but I separated it for a reason. So what's left after you pay for your operations, you can reserve, you could pay debt service with it, you could transfer it somewhere else. In this example here, we've said that $5 goes to repay debt service for something we've borrowed, and we're putting $5 away in a reserve account for some other purpose. So in the end, it balances at zero, and this is a $100 budget that would come to the board for appropriation at $100.
And then the following year, the fund balance starts with 20.
Great question. Yeah, that's the perfect lead in to the next slide.
Oh.
Perfect. Yeah. So when you roll into the actuals for the year, so at the end of February, time flies, end of June for fiscal 23, at some point after that, once we do all our reconciliation and finish up the year, we'll actually have a beginning fund balance. We'll know what our ending fund balance is for this year, and we'll know what that means in terms of beginning fund balance for FY24. So we budgeted it at $20, but it actually came in at 21. And that's very typical. We're usually pretty conservative in our budgeting. And so fund balance typically comes in a little bit higher, unless there was something significant that there was an error in our budget estimates. Our revenue in this example here, it usually comes in a little bit higher as well. Our expenses, they come in a little bit lower. We did not spend any of our contingency. So on our financial statements, it's zero. This means that our revenue over expenses is $35. Again, we budgeted for reserves of $5 and $5 for debt service. So that becomes our ending fund balance for the year of $25. That ends up becoming the basis to fund our contingency and perhaps something else moving forward. So the relationship here is essentially between contingency and fund balance. Now, there's also a few factors with a little bit extra revenue, a little bit less expense, but it's largely that relationship. Contingency unspent becomes fund balance.
But in this example, you have to pay your debt service. So that's a true actual expense. In this example, did you actually put your reserves into practice, or are they untouched?
Well, it could be either one. So
That's why I'm asking.
yeah. So this example here assumes that it's just $5 going into a savings account.
Untouched.
Yeah, but it could be that $10 goes to debt service instead of 5 and 5, or it could be $10 in reserves and we don't have any debt service.
But the reason I'm asking is debt service, that's actually money that goes away. Whereas I'm trying to clarify in this example, reserves didn't go anywhere. So it's still sitting there set aside.
That's right.
So it's still in that side account.
So, okay, I see what you're saying.
That's the difference here that isn't coming across.
So the reserve does not go to fund balance. The reserve goes to a separate savings account.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And how much do we currently have in that saving accounts for Washington County reserves?
Well, that's, I'll get to that here in a couple of minutes because we have our current policies combine both reserves and fund balance in one policy. So we have a certain amount in our fund balance, which is driven by contingency, but some of that is what's in a policy set aside for reserves. So effectively, we have some of those funds that, if you didn't know that, are being double counted. But hold on, I'll get to that in just a minute. Okay. So let's talk about policy now. So fund balance, I'm going to talk about general fund balance policy because that's how it's referred to in our current policies, but I'm going to transition over in a minute here. So our current fund balance policy says that we'll maintain a minimum of 15 to 20% of our net general fund revenue. Net general fund revenue is defined as our complete general fund revenue minus the transfers for MISTIP and the library. So based on our FY22 actuals, this.
Sure it says that versus a target of 15 to 20 with a minimum of 15.
Well, a minimum of 15, yeah.
Okay.
Minimum of 15 to 20.
Yep, got it.
So in real numbers for FY22, since we have actuals on that, is $37 to $50 million. And that is, hopefully I'm pushing the right button here. That's that number right there. This blue.
Wait, what? I'm not seeing, I'm looking there.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So it's the blue line. It's the top blue line. That represents
current policy. Got it.
Current policy fund balance.
Mhm.
So one of the concerns there is that, and the reason why you see that declining from FY19 down is that that number, that fund balance number includes the fund balance that's in the SIP fund, which, as we've talked about in the past, has been declining. So for
Can I ask a question? What caused the 2018, can you help me, drop on the current?
The SIP fund, a significant amount of dollars were used in the SIP fund because the dollars that were in SIP were also counted towards fund balance in FY17. And then we made a significant purchase. We used a lot of those funds in FY18, which drove that down, drove the balance down.
That was the event center.
Yeah, yeah, that's what okay. That's what I'm just trying to put all my puzzle pieces together here.
Yep. No, good questions. So for FY22, that number at the very end of the blue line is $58 million or 23%. So based on our current policy and how we've been measuring it, we are within those bounds, or we're above the 15% at least, and above the 20%. If we remove the one-time SIP funds, it drops that down to $47 million or 19%. And that's what the orange line represents. So I simply just took SIP out of the equation and ran that out so you can see the difference between the two.
Could you clarify, Greg, because I think you're getting a little while. If you took and siloed every activity outside the general fund and made it very skinny, your balances and percentages would change significantly. And that's what you're pointing to. It's exactly. I mean, we can make these numbers whatever we want just by taking revenues and expenditures and siloing them in another fund.
That's right. Right.
But he's also highlighting it because of our budget structural issues.
Yeah, but he's talking about general fund only. And so when you start pulling out special revenue funds, that policy is not dealing with special revenue funds.
That's right. That's right. So the exercise here is disaggregating the general fund, which is something that we've been doing in different presentations. I've had conversations with you, is disaggregating. It's part of the budget redesign, is to disaggregate where it makes sense, the general fund, so that we can be clear about it. It's more understandable, less mystery. And we can also make better decisions moving forward because we'll know the impacts of decisions into the future. So what does a future contingency policy look like? Well, one, it would be simpler, and it would be based on something like 4 months worth of property taxes in the general fund. So 4 months worth of property taxes in FY22 is $53 million. If you apply that same equation going back to FY17, you'll see that the gray bar. It's stable, it's growing at a reasonable rate, it's predictable, and it's something we can count on versus it moving all over the graph. This is consistent with GFOA best practices and would be created as a contingency during the budget. So two things. One is, why 4 months worth of property taxes? The theory behind 4 months worth of property taxes is that when your fiscal year starts July 1, you want to make sure you have enough money in your general fund to fund operations before, for that lag time until you get your property taxes in November. It's not any more complicated than that. GFOA provides some minimums in terms of what they recommend for fund balance, and they also provide a significant amount of latitude with direction for counties to develop their own fund balance policies, not just for the general fund, but for all of their funds.
So what that would do is remove the volatility of of what the amount is.
Mhm.
It would keep it balanced, it would keep it steady, and it would also continue to meet the purpose
That's right.
of the reserve fund,
Mhm.
correct?
That's right. And you could easily go into the budget document, find the property tax revenue, divided by 12, multiply by 4, and you would get this number. So it's very transparent.
Obviously, that
And driven
number
by
would
purpose.
change over
Yep.
year on year.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
So it's moving away 15 to 20% of that straight to either 4 months or 53 million.
4 months. So as our property tax revenue grows, so will the 4 months worth of property tax, or the 4 months worth of that number that becomes our contingency.
Inflation.
So the other key point I want to make here is the very last bullet, that we no longer target fund balance, we target contingency, knowing that there's a relationship between contingency and fund balance in the end. So we talk about contingency, not fund balance.
Would that be for all property tax funds? Because the general fund's not the only one.
Yes, it would be. Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And your question is about getting through the year.
Now, he's pegging it based upon property tax revenues. That works in the general fund, doesn't work in the special revenues, doesn't work in capital projects. It would work in the debt service. It would work in, if you have a separate MSTIP or a separate library fund, it would work in all of those, but that's the other funds, it would not.
That's right. And that's why GFOA has some latitude, because not all funds are created the same. Some need different forms of contingencies. Some don't need any.
So Greg, my concern is you and Roy just had a conversation that the two of you understand, and at least a
Okay.
couple of us are like, what the heck does that? mean?
Okay,
And why should we care? And what was that whole conversation?
What's the impact?
about?
Okay, let me back up, because he was leading right into my next slide.
Well,
But
wait.
let me
go
back.
Don't advance the slide yet. So I just want to highlight Commissioner Fai, that what this is sharing and being fully transparent about is we've had this financial policy around contingency of 4 months of property tax revenue, but you can see where the actuals were. We didn't actually achieve that unless we included the SIP revenue, which is one time. So this is where our operations and our 4 months of operations or contingency was relying upon this one-time source. And reminding us that we had some structural budget going back long before 4 of us were on this commission. That's all. Very simple.
Yeah, and thank you, appreciate that, Chair. And where does that fit in on the 4 months with this misstep?
It includes all property taxes, including MISTIP and the library. And on the other side of that equation is an expense, which includes the transfer out of those funds currently to those programs. So that's still consistent with all of our other general fund.
A little louder, please.
Oh, it's so that calculation includes the dollars that come in that are eventually allocated to MISTIP in the library. Just like it would with any other general fund operation where property taxes come in and we pay payroll for A&T or the DA or any of those.
Those still are general fund property.
They're just obligations, right? Now, saying all of that, there's more than one way to do this. We could have the conversation about SIP and decide that a portion of SIP would be considered ongoing. That could happen and would be included in that calculation. So this isn't black and white. I'm just presenting I only have so many minutes to have the conversation, so I want to keep it somewhat simple. This is where I've seen it done in the past, where I think it's simple, it works. Everybody seems to understand it, and it keeps our accounting and our budgeting a little bit more pristine.
Well, the other thing it reveals to me,
Oh, go ahead. He was asking me something.
go ahead. It highlights to me there was this long time policy in place that use one-time revenues for one-time things. And that wasn't actually what we put into practice. And so that's where we have to really get back to some fundamentals and make sure that our budget now and into the future is on that solid ground. The book's always balanced, don't get me wrong. But we had all these, there were these policies, but they weren't actually practiced. Yeah, thank you.
But just to clarify that, when you aggregate funds in a singular bucket, general fund, you needed that policy when you're disaggregate and starting putting funds in different buckets, and that's what you're proposing, which I think smart. Then you need different policies. So that's what's going on.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right. So as we disaggregate the general fund, the need for a policy that's complex like this one is less than it would be if we were disaggregated. And we actually, for those funds that we move out into other funds, they would have their own contingency policy as well.
I know this is like pulling teeth.
I'm fascinated that you guys are having a really great conversation between the two of you, but it's not helping us have that joint understanding, which all of your work moving forward is going to rely upon.
So I think maybe if you could interpret the question first, it's before you answer it,
So-
that might be helpful.
Okay, so what
Is that fair, Roy?
So I believe what Commissioner Rogers was stating is that the general fund to date has included a lot of activity that we are now looking at taking apart. We're moving our internal service functions out. We are talking about SIP separately and differently. We'll be looking at other operations in the general fund that are funded primarily outside of the general fund. And as we do that, that's another reason to look at how we manage our contingency and fund balance moving forward.
Is that because when they move out, they don't have a contingency?
They would have their own contingency.
Falls into a different category.
Right.
But and how does that affect the contingency of what's left in the general fund?
It's all still accounted for as contingency.
Okay, so I don't understand the problem.
What, by disaggregating it, we'll have a clearer picture about how things are working so that we'll be able to manage situations more clearly, know where we stand. So things aren't going to be as hidden and as
opaque.
Yes, thank you. That's the word.
And when you disaggregate, each of those funds need to have their own guiding policy.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense to me. Thank you.
That was my question, like, where is the SIP, which bucket? Where's the SIP going? But you're saying we're gonna have a policy for each of those buckets.
SIP will have its own policy.
Because we're disaggregating, but then I'm not sure I follow what's happening. That disaggregation.
When funds come in at different times from different areas, we were using general fund revenue to make up for those shortfalls. So that's what he's doing. I mean, it's like one big family budget without saying, well, here's my vacation fund, or here's my car fund, or.
Or you might need to speak up or
move the. What he's doing, and I'll try to make it simple. He's taking, and we use the general fund, the property tax revenue to cover all deficits and all other activities. I mean, that's what we were doing 4 months. Because their timing is different. All revenues come at a different time. So as you disaggregate, from what I'm understanding, you're going to need different policies because SIP might come in different intervals than general property taxes. And property tax, we know we don't get most of it until November. So you need a bunch of it from, July, August, September, October, because you're not getting much and you're running your activities. So that's why you need a lot bigger contingency, a lot bigger reserves in the general fund than you're going to need in some of the other funds.
No,
Yeah.
it
like being
isn't
on
about
commission.
the cycle the revenue comes in. If you look at the current budget document, SIP has its own pages, okay? But we've been using SIP to cover a lot of different costs as though we manage, Roy's correct in illustrating this as you have your household expenses. And just like with your checking account, you have to make it balance on some frequent basis. Otherwise you bounce checks, right? But if it's all about how planful are you going to be? How accountable are you going to be for your own practices? And because we are a more complex organization than we've been decades past, we do need to be more planful. And that's why we need to have some clarity, and the disaggregation will provide for that clarity. In addition, our county administration is going to make sure that we have further planning so that in having these clear accounts, we have not just practices that are in people's minds, but actually written down, policies that are written down so that it is managed with that level of clarity. And it's just something that some of the practices were in place, some of the policies were in place, but we weren't practicing them. And also there were practices that were being used that were never memorialized in policy. And also our management is making sure that we're being consistent in all of this. Those are the fundamentals that it gets at. Correct?
Well said.
Okay.
And one thing I would add is the fund balance policy that we have in place now, there is nothing wrong with that. It's good that we have a fund balance policy, but I think we can create something that's more fitting for the organization as we move forward.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, some of us are not CPAs. 3 of us are not CPAs around this table, okay? So we're not following all this cost accounting verbiage, but we know we need to be on the budget journey.
Yep.
So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, great comment. So contingencies in other funds. So we've been talking about the general fund. Well, there's other funds that don't have property tax revenue. There's other funds that don't have any outside revenue. Think of debt service. So a debt service fund, for example, doesn't need a contingency because you know exactly what the payment's going to be. There's no surprises. It is what it is. That's all you need to budget. Other operations, and I'm going to use finance, for example, we probably need some, we're an internal service function, moving out of the general fund into our own fund. We probably need some contingency, but we don't need 4 months worth of property tax contingency. And that's part of the disaggregating our internal services, IT, finance, HR, out of the general fund and creating our own. So the policy guideline will be moving in that direction, would be a 3% contingency for an internal service function department. Facilities, as an example, may need more, they're an internal service function, but due to the nature of their business, they may need more budgetary contingency. So we'll be looking at that as well. Other special operating funds, they're largely funded by grants. Perhaps 1 month worth of expenses is a good target. So not one contingency policy fits all funds. It just depends. And so there'll be some conversation around that. And there's some flexibility with the GFOA in terms of their guidance, Government Finance Officers Association, that we'll need to hunt towards as we move forward in developing these policies.
I assume that you're evergreen on those because you're going to learn as you go. what you're gonna need.
That's
And there
right.
will be timing differences, and the timing will, even in the debt service area, you'll have some debt payments that will come not with natural cycles of. You don't have capital projects on here. What are you gonna do with them? You're gonna have,
Those will be driven by the capital project themselves.
that's what I would do.
Yeah,
I just
not
noticed
by
you
the
didn't,
fund.
you didn't have it here, so I
Yeah.
didn't know.
Well, I think the first step is for us to get the CIP pulled together and
I
then
agree.
determine what that need is.
I just didn't know if you're gonna go and say, this is our Bible from here on out.
No, but that's a very good question, because we could have a project that we have a very high level of certainty that we need a lower contingency, and that would come through the estimate
That's
bidding
exactly
process. Yep.
Okay. So
Versus
these
one,
are just some guidelines that you're working on.
exactly.
This
Yeah, I'm
is
just
not
trying
the
to paint
Bible. Okay,
a broader brush.
okay. I didn't understand.
Reserves. Okay, so I think this might be my last slide. The purpose, so there's several purposes for reserves. Emergencies, things that we don't know about. We have a certain requirement. We have to have a certain amount of funds to maintain our debt covenants in our bond when we borrow money. We need to have a mechanism to fund future one-time expenses. We need to have a rainy day fund to guard against service disruption. We need to have money to be able to pay for things if our thing, internal insurance. So there's a lot of really, really good reasons for having reserves. And these are separate from contingencies. These are independent reserves. And the question is, well, how do you fund these reserves? So at Deschutes County, when we had excess property tax reserves, we would put them in a general capital reserve fund. We knew we always had projects to fund capital, just like we're learning here that we do. That's one way to do it. We could get a one-time source of revenue that could go in to fund a capital reserve or a reserve fund. We could be more direct about it and say, we want to build that into our budget. We want to put $5 each year into that fund, like that example that I showed you. So there's many ways to get there. But this will be part of our policy review as we move forward in having the conversation about how we want to use reserves, how they work into the future, particularly around our strategic plan. Some of these items that are coming up that require bigger dollars.
You know, I'd just like to make a couple comments here. I'm leaned over and said something to Commissioner Willie, and he reminded me that when we first came on, we had a debate about what percentage of the reserves, and it was like a debate in a vacuum for me, meaning that I didn't understand what the upside or the downside and what the impacts were. And the discussion here has really helped me. I'm still a little fuzzy, but it's really helped me understand the purpose of the reserve, the purpose and where we need to be mindful and protective, frankly, and what all the ramifications are. So this has been helpful, and I appreciate it, and I understand where it's appropriate to be looking at that steady line versus a line that is volatile, like I mentioned before. So I'm getting it, and I appreciate it.
Good. So one other point I'd throw in, talking about reserves, one of the questions is, can you have too much reserves?
Well, that's where we were.
That's what
That's where we were before.
So
it's almost like everybody had their own savings account, and so they'd stuff some money in there, and some had rich reserves and some didn't. And so that's what Pam and I were always looking at, going, what's the policy here? And it doesn't seem like there was one or consistently applied.
Turns out
So
there wasn't.
So that'll be another consideration. And I only bring this up because we dealt with this a lot in school districts. And the question was, how much do you reserve for the future, knowing that you're taking the funding that's been collected today for today's students and pushing it off into the future? We don't, in local governments, we don't have that conversation as much, but in schools, it was very big conversation. There's a balance there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say, on slide 8, which is titled Policy General Fund Balance, you did a nice job of enumerating. There's current and then there's future. So you're very clear about what we're working towards. The next two slides, contingencies and other funds and reserves. What you really have described here is what we're working towards. And that's important for all of us to recognize, because what we get with this next proposed budget will be different than the budgets that we have been dealing with. So if you're not getting the key message now, now's the time to speak up. Which, if I can come to the next slide, that one. I'm not sure I'll call the question on myself here. I'm not sure I got your key message on this slide.
So two things. One is what's a reserve for?
Yep.
And there's a bunch of reasons. I would say the one that we talk about the most here, or have been talking about the most here, is the last bullet under purpose. And that's to fund future one-time expenditures.
Right.
That's our capital reserve.
Right.
That goes back to the earlier plate I was showing you that drew the red arrow over to capital.
Mhm.
So the reserve mechanism could be a function for partially at least funding our capital improvements in the future.
Yep.
So that was part of it. The other part of it is, well, how do you fund the reserve? How do you do that? How do you get money in that account so you can fund that? Well, one way is we could build in a certain amount of money in the budget that funds a reserve account every year.
Yeah.
We could
You could be intentional.
be intentional about it. We could use excess property tax revenue if we had it. Anything over that we didn't need in our operating budget, we could push that off. We received one-time revenue, we could put that in there. And there's probably others I am missing here, but that's the point. You can either be intentional or you can be responsive.
How will this information be communicated to the public? And, this is obviously a public meeting, but also to our budget committees.
So tomorrow's task or this afternoon's task, I should say, is to begin organizing or to begin filling our budget committee seats. And part of that's going to be, we haven't talked about it yet, but my feeling is there's one budget committee training, but I think we're going to need more than one, given our situation that we're going through this year. And this and many other things will be part of that conversation with the budget committee.
And I'm just reflecting on the fact that our budget committees for a very long time have been dealing with the same
constructs.
The constructs all the way along. And now things are changing dramatically. Last year it was the budget equity tool that was a new piece, but we're continuing to change. And I just want to make sure that that's embedded in the process to bring those budget committees and the people who have been serving on those budget committees for a long time through the process.
Yeah, that education component is top of my list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's where, for me, for this particular slide set, slide 6 and 7, if you could just mark them examples. And slide 9 and 10, reinforcing.
Oh, like a water.
8, 9, 10. Giving that sense of this is part of our evolution, right? That progression. You're not just trying to explain what's been done in the past, but how our budget redesign is evolving towards clearer practices. I think that's something that we're already on the journey, but if we think about our budget committee members coming into a new training, we have to be conscientious about making sure we're clear with them about how our level of clarity, transparency, and intentionality is different than it's been in the past. It's just the nature of where we're at organizationally and the demands
The evolution.
that are placed upon us. which I have a question to ask the board after we've gone through questions and comments. Board members, any further questions, comments?
What's the implementation date? And you're thinking, are you going to build your 23-4?
It's rolling. It's a rolling implementation date, and this is part of building the airplane as we're flying it, or whatever that saying is, designing it. Yeah.
So when we get a published budget, then we need to know how close to target. You can't just give us an opaque cloud.
Yeah.
So specifically, what will occur in the proposed budget that you and the budget committee will receive are the internal service funds moving out of the general fund. Within the budget message, there will be a clear discussion relative to contingency reserves and clarity of what are we aiming for. So what's accomplished in this year's budget and forecasting what's to come in next year. Because we are needing to reduce expenditures in the general fund this year. So that's already one change on top of taking the internal service funds out of the general fund. So there's going to have to be narrative and clarity with both of those changes in the budget document.
So historically, we've given departments, we've approved their budget, but they knew they could only spend 95% of it. Are we staying with that same policy? Are we, and because that basically is a reserve mentality. You got 100%, but you only get to spend 95, so you have to save 5. So are we still doing that same?
No, this is part of moving away from that. I think if you're given 100% budget, then you have the authority to spend 100% of your budget. The 94% mark, I don't know the history of it, but it's ironically, it's the same number that traditionally departments spend anyway. It's just a traditional number, 94%. So I'm not a fan of it. I don't think it's important. I think we can be clear without it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the reserves are intentional that way.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Feel free to say that, Commissioner.
I was just making the comment that it's cultural. That's something that, and those are the hardest things to change, and so I think that we really need to be direct about this.
Yeah, and I would say that there's nothing wrong with that. It's a way of doing things. It's a way of getting to an end. And as we are doing the budget work that we're doing now, it's just one component that we can probably do different to be a little more transparent. But it was effective and it worked. So there was a reason for it in the past.
Sorry to have one more. Tanya was mentioning the certain funds. How do you classify ARPA funds, and will they be a separate fund that'll be moved over?
They are a separate fund already.
And that will be part of.
It already is. It's in its own fund.
I knew you had a separate fund, but it'll be
Fund
clear.
155.
Okay, but it'll be clear that these policies are applicable to it as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So as an example, that would fall generally, as we've had this conversation today, under the other funds, which would be 1 month worth of expenditures.
Sure.
And we've always had the opportunity to see contingency has been present in that fund.
Right.
Yep. Yep. So commissioners, I have a question for you. We received an email from Philip yesterday, and I want to make sure you've all had a chance to see it, titled Media Briefing on the County Budget.
Yes.
Okay. So our team has had a communications plan in place and has anticipated meeting with the media team about the Washington County budget in advance of the proposed. Please come up to the table, Philip, because I'm going off of memory. Like I said earlier, I have a cold, so I want to get it right. So they've had a plan. Philip will remind us what that plan is. We have organizationally received a request from one particular media outlet. And Philip did his marvelous responsive thing and asking us, given that there is a time frame target, what two commissioners might be available. For me, you know me, folks, I don't just claim the opportunity because I'm the chair, right? I'm an equal opportunity chair. But also, just because I'm available or can be made available doesn't mean I'm the right one. So I wanted to bring us back to this question because it's important that we achieve what the board as a body has decided it wants to achieve with this new budget, this upcoming budget, and the budget redesign. And towards that end, I want to bring us back to this question. First, Philip, can you remind us of what that communication plan has been with regard to the media, the proposed, the publication of the proposed budget, and then how does this request fit in the logistics of this specific request versus that general plan?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So you might recall that we're doing more communicating than we've ever done around this budget year, given all the challenges we're encountering and fundamental change that Greg and Tanya have been talking about.
And
for a
our
while.
whole organization change around design for the future, one Washington County.
Exactly, and most we had a conversation on January 5th where I walked through a month by month calendar. And most of the activity was focused internally, communicating, I should say, was focused internally on our own employees. So we've done we've checked off, we've done a lot of that work. Now we're at February, and one of the line items was, as you're mentioning, Chair, briefing for the media. We have not typically done that so early in the cycle. We would wait usually until we're about to release the proposed budget. But given the extraordinary circumstances of this particular cycle, we thought it would be useful to not only do what we usually do later on this cycle, but right around February, in that month of February.
Oh, so this is part of the, here's the lay of the land.
Lay of the land.
Here's how we got to where we're at, similar to what we've gone over with all of our employees, and we'll be going over with our town hall on the 23rd.
Correct. It's a context setting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
That's what it is. And so we had this line item in that outreach, plan that said in February, no date was assigned. We would do this media briefing, and the key players were obviously going to be Greg and Tanya. And then when we discussed this at your roundtable last month, board members were volunteering to, hey, we can be part of the message lift here, the media piece of that. So that's the backdrop to the email from.
So this isn't the briefing about what the proposed structure has, the whole budget redesign, these side conversations that were going on, not appropriate for this activity you're asking us to participate in.
Correct. This was going to be familiar territory content-wise that for your board. You've heard the presentation from Greg and Tanya multiple times, and that would be what we would turn to our media partners and give them an opportunity, an audience to learn about that and ask us questions.
Okay. So, next Wednesday afternoon?
That's the rough target. Nothing is confirmed yet, but that did look like a promising moment in some of your calendars next week. And I heard from the chair and I heard from Commissioner Rogers. Our intent was not to make it a public meeting or even broach perception that it was. So just two would be the intent there.
I'm happy to do it, but if you wanted to do it,
Don't want to.
Okay, okay.
I'll get that
All right.
right on the table. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think that there are others that have a better handle on this.
Okay.
I'm perfectly fine with the chair and Roy doing this. Obviously, Roy's got a lot of history to it. I have had conversation with Dan Telkin on this topic, and I can tell you to please keep the conversation elementary. Because one of his questions was, you have a $1.6 billion budget. What's 25 million? Well, he doesn't get what we're dealing with, the general fund. So also, I've had numerous conversations in some of my meetings with city councils around over the last couple of months. And they asked the same thing. Why don't you have enough money? What happened to this? So when you start walking them through the 4% property tax revenue that we get in an 8% inflation rate, the light comes on a little bit. So I would encourage you to keep it as basic as you possibly can, because the more complex you get, the faster you're going to lose them and their eyes are going to roll back and we've lost the battle. So keep it really basic.
Yep.
Talk about some advanced accounting.
Yes.
No doubt.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing I would say is, and I'm happy to do it as well, but it's disappointing on the timing. And here's why. I really would have liked to have seen something after the event. I won't be here, and I think Jerry's going to be gone too.
The
Something.
town hall?
Yeah, the town hall. Thank you. Yeah. Because that would have been an exposure to the public, and then you kind of fill in the gaps if there is any. But that's just my thought. I know you're trying to restate something, but
No, he's requested it.
I know, but we don't
Let's
have to
get
honor it.
clear on it.
I know, we don't have to honor it though. We could say, we'll meet with you right after after the town hall. To clarify.
Are you talking about Dan? Are you talking about media?
Well, that's what he said. I talked to Dan. I don't know what he's asking.
Well, my communication to Dan also was, you're pretty early in the game. We haven't even seen the 4, 7, and 10. We haven't seen numbers. We're talking concepts.
Well, and I don't know that we will. That's to Ms. Angie.
Mhm.
We get a proposed budget with some combination of all the information she's got. So I'm not going to be in a situation as a board member to explain what all the 4, 7, and 10s were. We know what Ms. Angie asked the departments and why those levels, but that's not information that we're going to be getting.
Yeah, but that's information that's available for public records too, for media purposes.
So
She's the spokesperson for that. She manages all of that, not us.
yeah, so kind of let's go back and talk about process. The media has requested information. That means someone has went to the media with a question, curiosity, concern. Okay, so this is really our opportunity to tell what
Oh, I
the
see.
story, what the context is. That is the same that the board is doing with the board town hall. It's the same that I'm doing meeting with the CBO executive directors on the 14th. I'm having another meeting with city managers and special district managers on the 14th. So this is to talk about what is the state of the county's general fund. In the spirit of partnership with our community, this is to help ensure there's no surprises. There will not be discussions around what the 4, 7, and 10% cut. Departments haven't even submitted their budget. More information to your board, budget committee, the community, employees, all stakeholders will be available in the proposed budget of April 27th. So I just kind of wanted to walk through some of that timing. And right now, this is also about, I will say, part of the need for the media briefings is frankly reacting to how the media portrayed the state of Washington County's finances in last year's budget process too.
I appreciate you providing that clarity. I didn't understand the backstory. It makes sense, but now does it make sense to follow Commissioner Rogers' process that he was proposing rather than react and respond?
So part of media relations is maintaining that good relationship with the media. Since there's people asking the media. So this is the time to tell the financial context that we've already been sharing with various partners. It's been openly shared in board meetings and also included in my leadership updates. I don't see any harm in doing that.
Yeah, thank you I had no idea what this was about. I thought maybe it was part of your plan just to communicate with them, but apparently somebody's contacted them and that's, oh, okay.
I mean,
I'm assuming
You were talking to him.
yeah, and it was part of our plan, just to be clear. We thought in February, in February, we would do something.
I've had no contact.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've like Tanya's mentioned, we have been so prolific in our communication. It could be anybody, and that's the way it works sometimes. We've done multiple countywide emails, 3 in as many months. That's over 2,000 people being informed by their county administrator about their situation. So I'm not casting blame or pointing fingers. But it turned out in our plan in February, we were going to have this opportunity that Tanya mentioned. So it's here for our taking if we wanted to follow up, and that's what we're asking about.
Will this be a combined meeting for all media, or?
My thought was, and it would be interesting if some of the reporters are listening to me right now, but my thought was that we would reach out to the reporter who's most been covering our situation, which is Troy Shin at the Pamplin Media. So I was going to reach out to Troy, and then as it turns out, I had this email from Dan Tilken at Coin yesterday. If let's bring them both if they're available. We can work it out, however we want. The main thing was to be proactive, like Tanya was saying, and set that context ahead of all the heavy lifting that's coming later this spring.
Great. Terrific. Thank you.
Fire 2.
Yay. Okay, we'll follow up.
2 1.
Yes.
Not that we're not good.
Thank you very much for joining us. I think that's it for the budget reserve policy. We do have one more topic on BCC Round Up. And this is to just recognize that as a full board, we have both individual and collective needs. And so right now we are back into a normal long session of the state legislature. I mentioned earlier, this is an example, I mentioned the meeting with the governor on homelessness. I mentioned the semiconductor joint committee, and they'll continue their work. So just working with our government relations team and Aaron Doyle, we've gotten the GR Weekly and the bill tracker. It's like a marathon for them every single day. So we wanted to add in this BCC Roundup as part of our roundtable right now, just as an opportunity to check in on how things are working, especially given this really important semiconductor joint committee effort. So she was planning on being on deck just in case you had any questions. Do you have any particular needs?
No, I appreciate Aaron, because I reached out for our Council of Forest Trust Lands. There are 3 bills that they're looking at, and Aaron got right back to me. So I really, over a weekend. So I appreciate the work that she's doing, and certainly I feel like we're getting on time information as we need it. So thank you, Aaron.
That's great.
I guess I would just ask if there's anything critical, if Erin's online, that she wants us to know. That'd be great. This is a great time for that.
There she is. Hey.
Good. Still morning. Sorry about the lighting in this room. I don't get to pick conference rooms. I think.
Salem?
I'm down in Salem at the AOC offices in one of their side conference rooms, so I can have this conversation with you. I think there are a couple of emerging issues that would be useful for the board to kind of hear about and ask specific questions about. The first is around the semiconductors information. I missed part of the chair's update this morning. I kind of caught the tail end of it about her meetings and conversations yesterday. But overall, I would say right now is the time where we can influence what comes out of that joint semiconductor committee. And the messaging that I would recommend for us is that in looking at all of the things that are recommended to make us CHIP Act ready, it needs to be a complete package, which includes the local incentive pieces, because the conversation has been around whether or not they need to include things like the gain share and SIP programs, enterprise zones, tax credits in this initial push, or push that off to the end of session. Pushing it off to the end of session really leaves us vulnerable to not being able to leverage the important piece that is for us as we seek the sufficient resources to be able to take on any other burdens that might come out of the rest of the policy choices that they're making. And so overall, I think that the county really needs to step forward with a clear message that in pursuing this opportunity, we need three things. We need to have that continued partnership with the state in the gain share and SIP program be a part of this package, and it must be brought up to current payments and then indexed for the future. Second, the state has to find those resources for local government to do the work that will be required related to the rest of the package, be it infrastructure planning, land use planning, any sort of thing that where the local government bears responsibility. There have to be resources that come with it, not just to pay for the physical infrastructure, but for the planning and processing around it. And third, that any sort of land use choices that the state is going to make needs to come with sideboards that protect those lands for the intended use of supporting our CHIP application and our CHIP eligible partners. So if we are going to make heavy investments of time, resources, planning, public conversation around anything related to land use, there needs to be sideboards that really protect the process, both for purposes of speed, but for longevity is long term. So I just wanted to throw that out there for you guys to start to have this discussion, make sure I haven't gone too far afield as we continue to have these conversations, but really that key message is it has to be a package that hits all pieces that affect local government at the same time. We can't afford to not know that gain share and SIP won't function for us if we're required to do more work. That's the first big issue. There's a second big set of issues that I'd like to briefly raise as well. So
yeah, so really good summary, Erin. And what I want to checkpoint with the board is, are you all thumbs up for this three key message subset for what we need in this process?
I think I'm fine. I don't understand if there is land planning, and I get down to the super siting between us. Are they going to carry the ball, and is that part of what we're talking about?
So one thing, if I could take a crack at this, Erin, what you're talking about, the sideboards?
That's yes.
Yes, on the board side, this super siting, to use that word, is for a very specific purpose.
Right.
Okay.
And I agree.
And we need to be clear between locally and state what the purpose is, and making sure both in the short term, immediate term, and long term, that if for whatever reason the specific CHIPS timeframe doesn't work out, or said companies decide something different, that the intended purpose is what is operationalized, as opposed to, oh, well, it's just sitting there, let's put a shopping mall on it or
The
something.
land use would go back to what it was. Yeah.
That it's been designated for this specific purpose, and that purpose should stay with it for the long term or revert.
Yeah, that I don't have a problem with that person.
I'm thumbs up, but I do have a question along with this. Are you looking for testimony at this point, Aaron? Or how?
Let's
maybe that's the next
agree
step.
on the bullets
I'm
first.
thumbs up.
Thumbs up on the bullets?
Yep.
Everybody's thumbs up on the direction that you've proposed.
Excellent. Thank you
Now,
for
for next steps
Thank you.
on that.
So on next steps, I think what I'll do is I will take that and I will kind of create some sort of written document. And we need to, and I'll work with all of you on figuring out who can be available. There is not a request for testimony quite yet, but that is forthcoming because they are trying to get this package put together. I think what needs to happen next is organizing how we speak to our delegation about the importance of that need, particularly on the game chair piece, because that's the piece that's most vulnerable right now. And so I'll put together a plan for having some of that outreach being done by each of you to show that across our board, there is agreement on the position of Washington County on how we are going to pursue this opportunity and what we need in return for it as a partner. So go ahead.
So we road tested some of these draft messages yesterday. And so, you know, pretty clear information there. The committee has had their very specific topics. The one on Monday was on the industrial lands piece, I think, if I remember it right.
Yes.
And one of the things that I'm looking out for next step wise is the Willamette Water Supply Project sorry, I should keep my mask on, spoke about their infrastructure need for the drinking water to be used for any such advanced manufacturing plant. But we well know as the Board of Clean Water Services that there's the outflow and that there's infrastructure costs related to that, let alone some new advanced manufacturing site with surface water, but that doesn't, I'm not too worried about that. So I wanted to make sure that we provided our teams with the direction to cover that base so that we're part on the CWS side as part of the equation for what the local infrastructure need as well. Yeah, yeah. You're all comfortable with that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will be chatting with Mark and Tracy and Joe about how to kind of quantify some of that and what the overall needs of clean water services is in this process as soon as we're all available, which turns out to be Monday.
Yeah,
so we'll
so
keep
it
you in the loop. I think for next steps with the legislature, this is really about getting our delegation motivated to push for us as part of the package in the near future, and figuring out when it is the best time for us to testify before the board that Washington County, provided the partnership comes from the state side, is a partner in this conversation.
So if I might to help, for lack of a better phrase, corral us a little bit on this. So it's February 2nd. February is a little bit of a short month, but it also has a few other things going on. So 3 of us, as the rolling agenda sheet says, will be traveling to NACO. 4 of us now. That's right. So each one of those line items under the February 14th column needs to be updated ASAP to reflect what days you're going to be away. Mine, for example, says February 11th through 19. This is not an optional request, folks. Here's why. Aaron and Zucker need to know who's going to be here and able to respond physically to meet face to face, let alone by telephone. So I know, for example, that after my NACO work, the 11th through the 16th, that I need to go do family things. I can't make phone calls then. So they're really asking us to have our act together. And if you're on vacation, that's just fine. No problem. We just need to be clear with them about our availability. That's all. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I would like to just say for me and me only, Erin, if I'm going to be taking days ahead of the NACO conference, but if you need me, I will be in internet availability. So if there's a need, reach out to me. Megan knows how to get a hold of me. I conversely can be available if I need to.
Megan, you're good at corralling me sometimes. Could you just put together a table for Aaron Doyle for the availability of the 5 of us, the Wens and the house? That'd be awesome.
Thank you very much.
As we
That'll be
try to
very
make
helpful.
it as easy or easier for you, less
Yes.
complicated for you as possible.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And we'll get that coordinated. And I appreciate Megan's help. She's great at corralling me as well. So, so if there's no further questions on the semiconductor stuff, I want to move to a second emerging issue that's kind of come up in the last 24 hours.
Go for it.
Could I ask one quick question on the semiconductor? I haven't looked at the agenda for the Ledge Committee on Monday for AOC. Will this come up at all in AOC context? In your crystal ball?
In my crystal ball, no, for a variety of reasons. But I haven't actually looked at the agenda for the finance and governance yet. I'm still putting together the community development, natural resources pieces of my brain for tomorrow and public safety for tomorrow. Oh yeah, there's a lot tomorrow. So there's not been a move at AOC to push this. I think there might be something around the long-term enterprise zones, and that is all in the wheelhouse of the counties that they are paying attention to right now. I think that we instead turn to the Eastern Oregon Counties Association and their external lobbyists that they pay for separately outside of AOC to provide that partnership on gain share, because they are another big user of the SIP and gain share program, and having gain share extended for 10 years with the caps don't affect them just because of the income tax revenue, but the long-term stability of the program really does. So that I will work with Rocky on that. So, but yeah.
I just want to be prepared. Thank you.
Yep. And if that changes, I will make sure that you have that information as quickly as I hear it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Moving on.
The other big thing that has come up in the last 24 hours, which caught a number of us that lobby in the local government world a little bit by surprise, which will have potentially some profound impacts in the metro region, is some bills that have come forward around taxation. And this is not property taxation, it is other means of taxing folks. In large part, there is a bill that would repeal the authority to do income taxing. And there has been conversation about making it retroactive, and all of this would have a direct impact on our SHS bond measure, or not bond measure, but our SHS tax measure. We have been talking with our fellow counties about how to approach this issue, also with the Metro lobbyists as well, because there are two things that I think are at issue. One is the process concerns that have been raised in the last news cycle, really, if my Twitter account has any say on what is actually happening in the news cycle, but also whether or not we should be allowed to do this moving forward. I think clarity, the direction that I see within our principles, and I just want to double check all of this with you, is that we need to have as many tools in the toolbox to pay for the services that we are really trying to serve the community needs with, especially in the realm of homelessness services, and getting people permanently housed. So opposition to anything that would really truly fundamentally take away those resources is something that we as a county would be opposed to. I think around the clarity around the process and how it functions at the local level as compared to the state level, there's still a conversation within staff about what is intended by that and how we can work on that as a region. But the statutory fiat has made it incredibly challenging for us to feel assured that our SHS funding isn't under attack. The other big component of all of this is the appeals process. They're trying to change how the appeals process may possibly work, letting an organization step in on behalf of any taxpayer and challenge anything to the Oregon tax court, which we suspect would lead to significant increases in litigation as organizations might have more resources to assert challenges, and delay it by not going through the local tax appeals process first for anything related to our taxes. And so we have some major process concerns around that bill as well. But I wanted to benchmark those with all of you, make sure that we have the conversation before I go and write letters and start lobbying. So I turn it back to you, and I can get you more information on the bills if you're not comfortable talking about it, but I want to first get the thumbs up that making sure that our SHS funding source should be protected is a goal and a direction of this board, to ask a clear question.
I'll kick off that first bucket of the two buckets under this taxation bills. There are existing measures that have been voter approved. It's not just the SHS one, but over in Multnomah County, they have their
Pre-K.
Thank you. And those were voter approved. You know, it's one thing for the state legislature to limit future versus repeal what the voters have already put in place. And so I think we should weigh in that regard, that the voters approved these things and that, as you said, these are important tools. At a minimum, they should not be repealing what the voters have already approved.
Can I ask a question, Catherine?
Yeah.
I'm sure I understand this. So basically what legislature is doing is trying to put a cap on the number of issues.
I'll be a
the
little bit
amount of
more
issues,
blunt. There are associations that are funded by deep-pocketed corporations that are trying to ensure that they have full control over employee compensation.
I see. Okay.
And they have way more money to influence legislators than we do. And they've been advancing this bill to remove the existing use of the voter approved income tax.
And you're talking about like wealth taxes, correct?
I'm talking about the income taxes on high income earners and businesses.
I just want to make sure I'm on the same page. I agree with you.
And so I'm just being frank about it. So, you know, if the legislature, I have my view on the legislature is they're the legislature, right? Towards the current and the future, they're there to entertain a lot of questions. But especially when the voters have approved something of funding for a service that the voters want in their locales, the legislators aren't the best versed in understanding the importance of those services to a locale that is smaller than full statewide, right? So that's why I'm a bit sensitive about they're not taking away the voter approved resource. Am I getting at your question, Commissioner Willie?
Yeah. So if they said, henceforth, we'll implement this January 1, 24, you would probably be a little bit more.
I might not like it individually, but that's the role of the state legislature.
It's
Right?
the retroactive piece.
It's the retroactive piece that.
Yeah, which is always interesting when you want to do something yesterday. From my standpoint, though, I'm gonna take a little bit of the devil's advocate. It's pretty easy to get voters to approve certain services when they don't have to pay for them. And so when you're targeting these initiatives at either a payroll tax that's corporately funded or a tax on the rich, the other 94% get to decide where that 6% spends their money because they want these initiatives. So I would agree with you on the retroactive part about that. But going forward, I could see why they're trying to push this initiative.
No, I don't disagree with what you've summarized at all.
Okay.
So, but just be ready. If you want to support them doing the retroactive, that you're not going to have much of a message in terms of how you're going to solve homelessness.
Yeah.
Or address homelessness. So, right. So.
Aaron, to weigh in on the question that you asked, as for me, I think I would like to see some of those bills that you mentioned. This is the first time I'm hearing this. So just to do my own due diligence here, just if you could send that to me, and then I can give you my 2 cents. Obviously,
We need to weigh in as a group so we can come back to it on Tuesday.
Absolutely. I think the statements that you've made, Aaron, I certainly concur around. We need to protect our services, and we know in Washington County the positive impact it had on our community and how we are managing our funds from this county. But I do want to do my due diligence and read some of these bills and then come back and provide my whether opinion or my take on.
We appreciate that. I will include it in the GR weekly memo and give you a summary of, sometimes they're hard to read because one section just repeals a section of code, and I'll give you the information that goes with what that statute is, so you understand. I'll give you the full analysis for and the bills themselves is part of our GR memo so that you all have it.
Thank you, Aaron.
So sorry to pull you away Tuesday morning let me look at the February 7th work session agenda. I think what we'll need to do is include that in our 9 to 10 o'clock section so that we let you go or make sure that you've got the rest of the day.
I appreciate that. I'll be available. I'll make myself available during that leadership update section. So if there's this or anything else that comes up over the weekend, you have me available to answer questions and get direction.
Great.
Could I ask one last question about this? So Aaron, as this moves, as this conceptually might move forward, how many counties have enacted taxes? Income taxes. Thank you, Roy. That would be affected.
I don't know of any that. So our region has the regional SHS within the metro region. So those 3 counties have that piece of that pie. Multnomah County.
Right.
I am not aware of any other county that has actually put forward any sort of income taxes. They have utilized the property tax system a little bit more. A lot of them face even opposition to changes in bonding for using their property taxes. So I don't think that they've gone very aggressively after any other form of taxation. I am aware of one city that has looked at a sales tax within their city. That did not go well for them either. Continue to note that.
Some of them have gas taxes, which are Special
There's
purpose
local.
sales taxes.
Yeah.
So Erin, I guess what I'm getting to is that what affects us is SHS, right? But what affects Multnomah County in this might be multiples. But the rest of the counties in this, and Clackamas has SHS. I'm just looking at the impact of a vote on this in relationship to the statewide application.
There doesn't need to be a state vote. The legislature, what we're talking about is legislative action.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about legislators from around the state. There's only 3 counties that are affected by this.
Right. Yep.
But a large delegation that represents those 3 counties.
Yes, that's true.
Which seems to me that they would support declining that, but is this, has
We're
any
just getting
momentum?
into the politics of it.
I just wanted to understand the landscape.
I think that's a
There
good point.
is,
Numbers
to
can be
Commissioner Fai's question around momentum, there is some momentum around this based on how the hearing went. The hearing, I think, caught a number of us, like the scheduling of the bill caught us all by surprise. And then the momentum that we heard within the committee's feedback, I think also took folks by surprise. We had not mounted a coordinated conversation around this bill yet, and we had not been,
Plowing the same ground.
yeah.
Yep, that's the challenge with having a really lean government relations team and all these bills. So, yep.
You got this, Aaron. Send us
Later.
those bills.
Yeah, send it.
Okay,
We'll help you.
I have one other thing, but thank you, Erin. It does.
Thank you
affect
all.
Yep, thank you. Going back to the roundtable agenda in March. We're not meeting the 4th week due to spring break. Right now, there is a board meeting scheduled for March 7th that has some items populated. According to this schedule, there would only be 2 2 board meetings that month, but right now, the evening meeting of the 21st is entirely empty. So, I'm wondering at this juncture if we don't actually have any actions we need to move on. I believe our charter requires that we have that evening meeting. If there's actually no content, I'm not encouraging staff just put content in it for content's sake. But if that's the case, we might just have a fully remote meeting, gavel in, gavel out kind of thing.
Take testimony.
Yeah. So,
That makes sense.
yeah.
Thank you for
And
saying that.
there's March 14th, a request to start at 10. I have no idea as to why, and how does that request get handled? No, Ms. Angie.
So I missed that. Let me check on that.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, that's it. Do any other commissioners have anything before we complete this roundtable? Does leadership have anything? I think we're done.
Good meeting.
Yep.
Onward, ho we go.
8 minutes to spare.
Enjoy your 2/2/23. Thank you.